I want to welcome back to the show, Amy Seiffert. Amy, welcome.
Oh my gosh, thanks for having me. I'm so delighted to be here.
It's so fun to chat with you. We're Instagram friends. You were on the show years ago, actually, like right during the pandemic. So much going on. So it's so fun to have you back. You have a new book, Starved. Talk to us about the heartbeat behind that book and what made you want to write it.
Yes. Well, it actually started under my own roof. My oldest son, I have three kids. My oldest son was diagnosed with Crohn's disease
Mm,
after it was so rough. And I mean, after he had lost 15 pounds in 6 weeks, it was pretty rapid
wow.
when it all woke up and blood work and all the tests. And we decided to do a drastic diet change. And I mean, after 3 days of a new diet change, we saw such a change. Like, he was nourished, he
Wow.
had more energy, and then 6 weeks later, he had gained his weight back. Like, it was transformative, but during that time, it was one of the, like, most spiritually dark times of my life because I was exhausted, I was anxious, I was overwhelmed.
Hmm.
I felt like it was all up to me to
Right.
solve this, to put Crohn's disease into remission, and I felt like God was whispering to me, "You need a spiritual diet change. Something has to change. Like, you are running to Google to search for answers, and I want you to come to me." So it came out of what I saw under my own roof, and then I looked around and I felt like our culture is starving for
Hmm.
new practices, putting our phones down and picking up true connection with God and with others, and just really exploring what's the plate that we have, what's on our plate, and not add to our plate, but what can we replace with something more nourishing?
Hmm. I love that. They say that as Americans, we're overfed but undernourished. You know
Yes.
what I mean? With our food and our
Yep.
diet. And what you're saying is that we're doing that with our spiritual connection and that we're
Mhm.
spiritually malnourished. What do you mean by that term? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, yes. So, if someone is malnourished, they're not getting the nutrients that they need, and they're starting to feel the effects of that. So if we're spiritually malnourished, I mean, that means we're not getting what we need spiritually from God. So we're not being nourished, and finding peace where there is anxiety, and finding
Hmm.
integration where there is disintegration, and finding hope where there is fear. And so what are we feasting on that is actually feeding anxiety, overwhelm, and exhaustion? And I'm finding, I mean, my first chapter is about our phones because
Yeah.
I'm a recovering phoneaholic, let's be honest.
I know you are so brave to share your number in the book.
8 hours and
It, it,
47 minutes.
it's almost like stepping on the scale and saying like how much you weigh, like how much phone time you have. I feel like there's like that same level of shame. Like, I mean, what's your number? What's your number?
I, I remember I didn't even know you could find out that information. It was years ago. And I looked, I was like, oh, like, it was this magazine. I also tell a time where I mindlessly was getting in the shower and was grabbing my phone right before I was going to the shower. Like, that
Mm,
is how connected I felt like I needed to be. And God really whispering, put down the phone and pick up silence,
hmm.
which is really scary. I don't like silence. I'm not
Hmm.
good at it. I like noise and distraction. But the other day, I'll tell you this, I called down to all my kids to ask them to do their dinner jobs to get it all
Hmm.
going. And I called down, nothing, nothing. And then I finally went downstairs and they all had headphones in.
Uh-huh, they couldn't hear you.
They couldn't hear me. But this is what we do to God. If I'm in front of a screen listening to all the voices in front of me, I cannot hear the voice of God. I cannot
Mm.
hear the shepherd's voice. And so really practice putting down all the other voices and sitting to hear God.
Hmm.
It's a good practice.
It is. It sounds so basic, but I think whenever
Yeah.
you get down to doing it, it's so challenging. You know, as a counselor, I hear people's stories, and I think one of the things that's so hard is whenever we're in a negative spot to do the positive thing, because to do the positive thing is so difficult. So to sit in that
Yes.
silence gets us back to our anxiety that we're trying to numb with the entire time. And so you talked
Right.
about being in silence shape And I think that's such a great way to look at it. Like, you know, we don't have to have like this like hour long silence,
Totally.
but to start off with like 30 seconds, you know,
Yes.
it sounds so
Yes.
basic, but when it's silent, it's amazing how kind of deafening that noise, that lack of noise can be.
I love what you just said about the putting in the positive. And to start, I'm not let's not start training for a marathon here. Like, let's start
Exactly.
really small.
Go for a
5
walk.
minutes. Go for a walk. 5 minutes of silence. Literally set your timer and say, I'm just gonna sit and I'm gonna be, and I'm gonna let myself be loved when I'm not productive as an Enneagram
Mhm.
3.
Yes.
Or whatever that, that fear is that you're going to. And I'm amazed at the practice of that. I remember the first time I practiced 5 minutes of silence, the first 4 minutes, I felt like this cat that couldn't find its nap spot, like
Mhm.
just kind of
Yeah.
trying to settle in, and finally that last minute, I did feel a healing of the hurry in my life. Like,
Mm.
God is in control and I can sit here and rest.
Mhm.
And that's been motivating for me to keep practicing silence.
Yeah, I love that. And, you know, again, just going back to those small moments of taking that deep breath. And
Yes.
I think about time and money the same way. You know, we have 168 quote hours or dollars, you know, in a week. And if we're spending a significant portion of that on our phones, we're not going to have what we need to invest into our lives. And we're going to be poor, malnourished in every area of our life. And so I do feel like the phone is a great place to start because it's a great place for found money. You know what I mean?
I
Like,
love that.
no
Yes.
matter where we are, we have extra time with our phone. You know, one thing I'll do with clients and myself is like, okay, what's your Instagram time? Okay, it's this
Love
amount.
it.
Okay, cut it in half. Like, don't take it away. Just cut it in half and use that other, let's say 45 minutes, wink, wink. I mean, it's way more than 45
Exactly. We'll be generous with that.
But if you use those 45 minutes to, you know, make your bed, have 5 minutes of
Yes.
silence, go for a walk, how much is that going to impact your spiritual health, your emotional health, your relational health? And to me, it's about building those muscles to then create that change of the starting small and allowing that small to grow big. What are your thoughts about that, Amy? Because it's so hard to start small. We despise the small things.
We do. And I love everything you just said. I'm like personally nourished by what you just shared. It's so good. Yes, I think start small is the only way to do it. I mean, it's again, if you're thinking, well, I want to take up running and you feel like you have to start running, 4 miles a day, that's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
You feel like you're failing. But if you're like, I am going to, just so you said, take 5 minutes, or the studies show that the average American checks their phone 344 times a day. Even if we cut that in a third, and what if I didn't check my phone? What if I looked at Psalm 23 a third of the
Mm-hmm.
time? That would be over 100 times of looking at God as my shepherd in a really small way. And that's what I want to encourage my readers, like, take a small step, 5 minutes at a time, 10 minutes here, little changes that have huge impact. Making your
Mm-hmm.
bed has a huge impact on your whole room, right? Like,
I think so.
yes. Yeah. So I'm huge on the small changes, which is what I try to say, like, and to make a plan for the small change. If you want to change how you eat, you're going to have to put down carrots and apples and spinach on your meal plan for your
Mm-hmm.
grocery list. Just
Yeah.
write that down and then purchase them and then put them, on your plate. But it's one step at a time.
Mm-hmm. You know what I loved what you said about your own, you know, physical diet that you guys did is that you noticed a change within a few days. You
Yeah.
didn't notice it like that moment.
Oh, sure.
You
Yes.
notice it a
Yes.
few days later, which is still a pretty fast amount of time to notice a diet change. But I
Mhm.
think we need to allow that space. We're not going to maybe feel instantly better the first time we read Psalm 23.
Right. Yes,
But
yes, the
give it a
space for
few
the process.
days. Give it a few days and reflect back. Can you talk about that mindful practice of like reflecting on how that change can happen? Because I feel like sometimes
Yes.
we're like, oh, that didn't work because I don't feel instantly better. And
Because we're such an instant society, right? Like instant validation, microwave society, and to take a crock-pot approach that this is going to simmer and the change will be over time. Absolutely. This is why I think journaling can be huge, because you can look back
mm,
and you have collected evidence of what God has done. For me, looking back 6 months ago, asking God to do something, and to be like, oh my gosh, he worked in February and then again in March and then again in April,
mm-hmm,
and I'm not good at looking back, but how good that is for us to see the good process and transformation truly being transformed over time as we renew our mind, as Romans 12:2 tells us to do, is so valuable. But we have to build that muscle.
mm-hmm.
We're not practiced in the process, the slowness.
Yeah, it's pretty sad, isn't it? I feel like we just keep getting like faster and faster, and our souls are so hurried and rushed. That to
Oh,
even take the time to journaling for a lot of people, they're thinking, I'm listening to this as I'm washing dishes or I'm driving somewhere. Like I can't I don't even know how to fit that in.
right. Where do I put that? I
Mm-hmm.
know. And what does it look like to say, what if I set my alarm for just 10 minutes earlier than it
Mm-hmm.
was, and commit 5 of those minutes to journaling and writing out. For me, journaling is huge because it's an anxiety reducer.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things and the practices I love, I've adapted it from an author, James Bryan Smith. But in the morning, I'll list everything I'm anxious about. Just, you
Mm-hmm.
know, from what are we having to dinner to how am I going to have enough energy for, everything I'm nervous about, anxious, overwhelmed. And then I'll go back and look and say, what can I control? What can I do about any of these? Is there anything
Mm-hmm.
I can do? And then what's left that I cannot there, it's absolutely out of my control. That's when I just write a prayer of, God, I need you to move in my teenager's life. I can't control his
Mm-hmm.
choices. I release how this person feels about me and their opinions because I can't control that. So
Mm-hmm.
just that practice of surrender through journaling and then looking back and seeing what he did is really great.
I think that's so powerful. I think anxiety has so much to do with the issue of power.
Yes, and control, right?
Uh-huh. And I think we try to control the uncontrollables and then we don't control the little part that's ours. I'm curious in your list, like how much of that, I'm sure it varies from day to day, but if you had to give an average of the percentage, like what part is your part and what part is God's part in terms of like those areas of anxiety?
Yes, it feels like 25% is mine
Yeah.
and 75%, which is fun. On my Instagram, I kind of wrote out, our circle of control that I've seen all over the place. Like
Yeah.
what you can control,
Hmm.
like my emotions, my reactions, my feelings, but what I can't, oh my gosh, so much, so much.
Hmm.
And to release that and open my hands and just say, like, God, this is yours. Like, I
Hmm.
don't want to carry it. I can't control it. I can't shape it. I can't fix it. I can't manipulate it. I got to give it to you, you
Hmm.
know? And maybe I have to say that 2 hours later because I grabbed it back.
Or 30 seconds later.
Exactly. And that's okay. God is not exhausted or tired about us coming to him. He loves it. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I think when we think about the idea in the lens of control, it makes me also think about the perspective of shame. Because I feel like
Yes.
as we feel like we can't control these things, it really puts us in a position of feeling powerless, which leads us feeling shameful. You have a whole chapter on shame. Talk to us about how shame impacts our connection with God and others.
Absolutely. Yes, I get pretty vulnerable. For your listeners, I'll just share I was sexually abused as a child,
Mhm.
and I kind of locked that moment away for years and years. And then it woke back up as our brains do when my son turned that same age.
Mhm.
And so I had to really face what happened. And the beauty of bringing that story into the light, because our enemy loves darkness, loves to
Mm-hmm.
say, don't share. I mean, you will be rejected if you share these things.
Mm-hmm.
So to bring that into the light and ask God, would you give me a new narrative? Would you give me a new nourishing narrative about who I am, who you are, how you see me?
Mm-hmm.
And lately, and I write about some different places in the book, but lately, Luke 15, verse 20, I would
Mm-hmm.
encourage any listener to take a
Mm-hmm.
minute looking at that verse. But this is the picture of how how the Father feels about us.
Mm-hmm.
And there's 5 verbs in there I can't get over.
Mm-hmm.
It says that God saw his son coming
Mm-hmm.
home,
Mm-hmm.
just that we are seen,
Mm-hmm.
and that he was filled with compassion for his son,
Mm-hmm.
that his heart posture is compassion forward. And then he's running, embracing, kissing.
Mm-hmm.
And to really practice this, I am worthy of this posture that the Father has upon me, and to really let that be the narrative. And practicing those 5 verbs and using my holy imagination to rewrite that narrative has been so healing for
Mm.
me.
Thank you for sharing that, because as we share our stories, it really does bring connection and
Mhm.
healing. And
Yes.
I think when it comes to especially sexual abuse, we're told to keep it hidden.
Mhm.
And it's kind of like keeping an infection hidden in our bodies. It begins to
Yes.
impact every area of our life, whether or not we think about it. I call it like the leftovers in the fridge phenomena. We've all done it. You know what I mean? Like
Yes. Yes.
leftovers back there. And I think some things is like leftovers with the lid off. You know what I mean? And you go back there and you're like, what in the
Yes.
world is
What
this?
is that smell?
Science project. But then the leftovers begin to impact and influence the good, fresh food that's in there. And when I think
So
about
good.
abuse, it's kind of a silly way to talk about something super serious, but I still think it gives a picture of whenever we're honest about those broken places in our life, bringing that to the front, cleaning it out with God, then we're able to really walk in more freedom and more
Yes.
connection. But it's so hard whenever there's something that we don't even know that's holding us back. It's holding us
Yes.
back.
Yes. I didn't even know that shame story had caused me to be a perfectionist so that I would be
Mm.
accepted and not rejected by everybody around me.
What was that shame story, without getting into the details of the abuse, but like, what did that leave you believing about yourself and others?
Yeah, well, I wanted to just kind of have everything together so that I would be acceptable to you.
Mm.
Um, that I would be, I really believed that in order to be loved, I had to be perfect. And that
Wow.
was this connect. Yeah, that took me a while to understand. And then realizing, oh, wait, that's an unsustainable way to live.
Yeah.
That's exhausting. And that's not what God has set up for us. We're
Mhm.
loved because we're his and we're made in his image and he delights in us. Says Psalm 18:19, he rescued us
Mhm.
because he delights in us.
Mhm.
But yeah, perfectionism became a shield to keep people um farther enough away. I didn't want to let people in. Yeah, because I think I was afraid that if I let people into the cracks in the mess and what happened, I would lose everybody. Like I
Yeah.
wouldn't belong, be rejected.
Mhm. Yeah, that sense of belonging is so crucial. And
Yes.
all of us want connection. All of it, God made us for connection. But
We're
that
created
shame,
for it.
yeah, that shame keeps us so isolated. You talk about vulnerability being the antidote to shame.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit about what that vulnerability looks like, especially whenever maybe we don't feel like we can be vulnerable or we don't even know how to do that?
Yes. Well, and shout out to Brene Brown for all
I
her
know,
work
right?
on vulnerability and
I
shame and
call her
courage.
Aunt Brene. Like if ever I need like encouragement, just like pop into Audible, and she's just,
So good.
I
She's
love
so
her so
brilliant.
much. Yeah.
I love her. And just even taking that into the spiritual space that again, um, God, like Jesus is light and light is healing.
Hmm.
Um, the enemy wants us to stay dark and small in our shame,
Mhm.
and but to bringing it to the light. But that's scary, because you can think, well, who do I share this with? Like, what's my grid? How do I bring this ugly, hard, shameful part of me? And so even thinking like, okay, I'm going to take my cues from the way God wrote. The first way he explained himself to Moses in Exodus 34 is he said, the Lord, compassionate and gracious,
Mhm.
slow to anger, abounding
Mhm.
in loving kindness and faithfulness. So I would say, find your compassion forward friend that will hold your
Mhm.
story and just say, I'm so sorry.
Mhm.
And I would say, trust your spiritual gut. You know who would be compassionate to you, and who, like, that might be re-traumatizing if I share this with them.
Mhm.
They might heap more shame on me.
Mhm.
But I'd say trust your spiritual gut on that. And remember, I talk about this in the book, even if you share your story with someone and you're trusting that they're compassionate, even if they're not, God is the keeper of your soul. You're not handing
Exactly.
them your soul. God keeps your soul even as you step out in faith for healing. But ask him, say, God, who in my life can I share this with? Or is there a
Mhm.
therapist or a counselor that you can lead me to? Because again, in the light and in vulnerability is the healing.
Mhm. Yeah, and I feel like sometimes our journal, like you're talking about, can be even at the perfect place to start. Sometimes it's just being vulnerable with ourselves.
Yes.
You know what I
Naming it
mean?
to ourself.
Yeah, at least having an idea of like what in the world is this leftover dish? What is this even?
What is this? The
You know what
naming,
I?
right? The
Yeah.
naming.
Mhm.
I love that, to yourself. Because then
Mhm.
you have that integrated, like, I'm admitting what is here and I'm not denying it anymore.
Mhm. Yeah, in the
Yeah.
book you talk about Brene Brown's research about like how she says that shame, I am bad, versus guilt is I did something bad. And I think whenever
Yes.
we're operating that shame too, it's so focused on the self. It keeps
Yes.
us so trapped, and I'm so guilty of this. Like then all I'm thinking about is me, but not like in a
Mhm.
fun way. Like I'm so
Right.
awesome.
Yes. In
I'm
a self-focused,
yeah, I'm
right?
an Enneagram 2, and the sin of the 2 is pride. But it's not like a
Yes.
fun pride. It's more of like a pride of like, I'm so terrible and I shouldn't be terrible. And so it's so difficult for those of us who, and I think to all of us to some extent deal with this. Like the self gets so we pick at ourselves so much that we don't even feel like we're worthy of connection, or we're too exhausted for connection. And then
Yes.
most of us, if nothing else, just go to our phone. You know what
Absolutely.
I mean? It's like I don't
Yes.
have the energy for anything. All I'm going to do is scroll Instagram or
Yes.
TikTok or whatever it is.
Yes. Yes. And what does it look like to think in that moment, to even recognize I'm craving connection, but in a really safe distance
Mm,
way? And that's when you're on
yeah.
Instagram, right? Like, I'm
Hmm.
hoping to sort of connect to somebody's life, comment here and there, whatever. What does it look like what would be the meal replacement for
I
nourishment?
love that.
Could I call a friend instead?
Hmm.
Um, could I text somebody, a real friend?
Hmm.
Um, this is the moment where I could sit in silence and connect to God, but even recognizing, why am I opening this app and craving connection? I'm created for that. So good. We want to belong. So what does it actually look like to do that?
I love that. Again, bringing that awareness to the action. You talk about how our thoughts create feelings and our feelings create, actions. This is so much of the therapeutic work that I do. So to
Yes.
me, it's like putting into practice, like looking at the action, not out of criticism, but out of
No.
curiosity. Like, why am I doing this? Like, what's going on? Do I want to be seen? Am I hoping to see how many likes I have? Am
Right.
I am I wanting that approval? Am I wanting that connection? And none of those needs are bad needs. Like God created a space for them. But I love that idea of a meal replacement, because if we're just feeding off of junk food the whole time, it's just such
It's
a
where
frustrating cycle.
Yes, yes, that recognizing. And I think what you just said, to not judge our feelings. Like, what am I feeling right now? Okay, there it is. So what's the healthy nourishment for that? What's the connection piece for that? I love that. Like, and asking the question, this has been huge for me. What do I want? Jesus
Hmm.
asked that all the time
He
to
did.
people. Yes. When,
Tell us about
when,
that, Amy, because I think a lot of us think our wants are bad and we shouldn't even think about
yes.
what we want.
Well, I think about the blind man who was calling out, Jesus, son of David. And the disciples were like, ignore him, keep
Go
going, keep
away.
going. And Jesus turns to him and says, what is it you want? And we're all reading the story and we're like, duh, he
Duh.
wants to be healed. He wants to see, you know? But I think it's important that he asked him, what do you want? Name it. Like,
Mm.
come to me with all of your feelings and desires and say out loud, like, I want to see. And that freedom, I think, especially for women to name, what do I want? I feel like we don't have permission a lot of times to like,
That feels scary.
I feel scary to say, I want blank. I feel like I'm not allowed.
Mm-hmm.
But Jesus gives us that permission to come to him and say, I want connection. I want healing. I want to feel whole. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I don't feel seen,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to really name, what do you
Mm-hmm.
want?
Mm-hmm. This is bad grammar, but I call it like, what do I want? Because I think what we want in the moment is to feel better. So we escape or do whatever. But what do we really want? What do we desire? Or a capital W want? I want to be, I love
Yes.
that. I want to be seen. I want
I love that.
rest. And so is this action
Yeah.
actually bringing me rest?
Right.
Is this actually bringing me connection? And I'll just speak for myself. I mean, a lot of times it's not. It feels good in the
Mm-mm.
moment, but it actually leaves me more drained or less filled and nourished.
Yes. And I just want to say, I think there's a place for that distraction that might get you out of a spiral. But
Mm-hmm.
man, it's such a fine line because that distraction becomes habit forming.
Totally.
And so it's hard. Like, I wonder if there's a different way to build in, I need a distraction right now because I'm spiraling into anxious. Well, maybe I should just get up and walk around my house or get
Mm-hmm.
outside, put my phone down.
Mm-hmm.
And just, but it will take some slowing down and thinking.
And
We're
being
going so
uncomfortable.
fast and being uncomfortable. Nobody wants to be uncomfortable.
Mm-mm.
Yes.
There's a little sentence in the informed consent document for people who are going to do counseling with me. And basically it's like counseling can make things worse. It can,
Yes, for
you're
real though.
clearing out the fridge. It can feel very unpleasant. And so
Yes.
we don't have to do everything all at once. And I really am. And so are you, all about those like bite-sized changes, those bite-sized meal replacements. Like eat the carrots and the apples and go ahead and eat the cheeseburger too. But
Absolutely.
like let's start filling up on, let's add some nourishment and begin to rely less on this over here.
And create the taste for what is good. I know that the more I drink my green smoothie, the more I
Mm-hmm.
develop a taste for that. But if I'm
Mm-hmm.
only eating the cheeseburgers, that's all I want. My body is conditioned to just want
Mm-hmm.
that salt and that,
Mm-hmm.
but it's slow. It's a slow, slow
Mm-hmm.
change, a little bit at a time.
Mm-hmm. A little bit at a
Yeah.
time. I love how at
Yeah.
the end of each chapter you offer both practices and prayers. You know, it gives us something to do. Can you talk about some of those practices and prayers that we can put those into our life like today? It doesn't
Today,
have
right
to
now.
be like a big moment. These are tangible moments that we can begin implementing. So talk to us about those, a practice or a prayer that comes to mind that could be super helpful for someone.
Absolutely. I'm all about practical. I did this the other day in the car I was driving, and Richard Foster in his Celebration of Disciplines has the palms down, palms up
Yeah, I love that one.
practice.
Talk to us about that.
Yeah, it's so good. I was driving and I was feeling overwhelmed by what was on my calendar, what was coming up, and thinking I don't have enough time. That's always my thing. I don't have enough time. And I feel like God is always like, there will be time to do what I have set out for you to do.
But I want to
And
do
so
everything.
I would do it all, right? And add more. And yes. So in the car as I'm driving, I had one hand on the wheel and I took my other hand and I put a palm down. I said, God, I release my fear and anxiety about there not being enough time today. Like I dropped that in your lap.
Mhm.
And then I turned my hand over and I said, I receive the grace to do what's in front of me. I receive
Mhm.
that you're abundant when I have a scarcity mindset
Mhm.
and think that there's not enough. Um, So yeah, that palms down, palms up exercise is helpful because it's literally using my body, my mind, my emotions, connecting my soul to my,
I love
that's so
that too.
helpful.
In the book, you talk about, both palms open and up and down,
Hmm.
but you were
Hmm.
driving, so you could only do one palm.
Yeah.
And I love that you did what you could do. You didn't wait to get home. You went ahead and did it, and it was impactful and meaningful. You did it in a safe way, but that was accessible. I think sometimes we just wait for like the stars to align to do
Oh,
anything, and then like
so
that's just
yeah.
like never gonna happen.
Yeah, I needed to be like perfect conditions, like all the
Uh-huh.
things. Yes,
The
I remember
candle, the quiet time
yeah,
chair, the
my
coffee.
perfect pen. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
In college, like feeling like I had to clean my room before I started writing a paper. And that was unsustainable because
Yeah.
I just needed to start. And like, yes, exactly. One hand is fine. It'll do. It's okay. Yeah. And then I do love breath prayers. And
Yeah,
I
talk to
have a
us about
lot of
that.
yeah, I think to just have a few words that you inhale with and then a few words you exhale with that are connected
Mhm.
to scripture. I mean, truly, Psalm 23, I go back to it all the time.
Yeah.
Um, but there's the moment of him saying in verse 4, like, I will fear no evil. And there's a why there because God is
Mhm.
with me.
Mhm.
And so for me to inhale, I will not fear, and exhale because God is here.
Mhm.
I will not fear. God is
Mhm.
here. And it just reminds me, I need to remember who God is and his character.
Totally.
I just, I dive into self sufficiency all the time and think
Mhm.
I've got to do it versus God being like, I'm here and I am all sufficient and I can help you. But you got to come to
Mhm.
me.
Mhm.
You have to come to me.
Mhm. Yeah. He doesn't do it for us. He waits for us to ask him. And
Yeah.
it must be very painful. I know it is for my kids when they're doing something. I'm like, if you would just ask,
Yes,
I
I will
could come
help
in and make
you.
this so much better. But I can't
But
come in
you're
and
going to
like,
keep trying.
yeah. And I do take over sometimes, but I
Yeah.
try not to, especially the older that they get. I love that prayer that I'm afraid.
I'm afraid.
And just accepting
Yeah.
that, it's amazing just from a neurological point of view. The amygdala is the emotional part of our brain, and it's called the smoke detector. And so
Oh, I love
if you
that.
simply say I'm afraid, especially if like I'm afraid because I don't know if I have enough time, it automatically like calms down your system because it's not like you're afraid because like somebody's like chasing you and going to kill you.
A bear is coming. Yes.
Yeah. So I love that just from like a neurological point of view that I'm afraid I don't feel like I have enough time, but God, you're here and you're sufficient. So we're doing so much in that little moment that we don't even
Mm,
realize that God made our brain to be able to operate in health and well-being through being connected with him. I think
I
it's like
love
mind
that.
blowing.
It's so good because it reminds you of your safety. Like I'm safe, I'm
Yeah.
here, I'm okay right now. Yes, that's so beautiful. I know. I'm sure as a therapist, you marvel at the way the brain and
Mhm.
God and like how we're created and what that, it's amazing.
It's so simple. So I graduated grad school in 2007 or 8. I can't even remember. It doesn't
I know,
matter.
right?
I think it was
Right.
07. And then we didn't even talk about the brain.
Oh
So
my
just like
gosh, so
a
much.
relatively short amount of time later, just the impact of just saying like, hey, your brain is like freaking out right now. You're in like fight, flight, freeze, fawn mode. And like, that's
Yes.
okay. Like, but you don't have to stay that way. And God wants us to be regulated, but we live
Mm,
so dysregulated. And Amy, what you're saying is that as we feed on good stuff, it just brings regulation and health.
yes. Yes. Which is actually, if you talk about just dysregulated anxiety, I was really struck by the Greek word for anxiety, which is
Mm,
merimneo, which means to
mm-hmm.
be divided and torn apart.
Yeah. Ooh, that's
Like,
good.
yes, as if I'm in my kitchen doing dishes and here in one spot, but I'm divided and torn. I'm thinking about the future, or I'm thinking about my kid and what he's doing at school right now that I have no control about. Like, I'm in one spot, but
Mm-hmm.
my mind is somewhere else. I'm divided. And then the word for peace is to bind up that which is divided, that we would stay
Ooh, I love that.
present. Yeah, Irene is that word, peace, to bind up. And so that's literally saying, God, keep me in my spot right here where my feet are. I have work to do right in front of me, but if I'm divided, I'm not going to be able to do the work. If I'm just thinking about my kid at school right now, I can't do the work you have for me in front of me. So I have to trust you with my kid. I'm gonna trust you, and I'm asking to keep me integrated right here in your peace.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's powerful. So anxiety means to be divided.
Yes.
Peace means to bring together.
Yes.
So if
Yes.
you're anxious, that peace is going to be so critical. And I love how the breath prayer is a simple way to bring that peace. So good,
Yes.
Amy. Where can we find you? Where can we get the book?
Oh my gosh. Well, I think the gram is fun when I don't get sucked down into the hole of hours. So I'm on
Yeah.
Instagram.
Did you see the Super Bowl commercial about the rabbit holes? There was a Super Bowl
Yes.
commercial about
Yes.
that.
Yes. You're like, that's real.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Instagram, you can, I have a website, amyseiffert.com, and then Starved coming out is anywhere books are sold. You can pre-order now.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Amy. It's good to
Oh,
see
absolutely.
you.
Thanks for having me.
So
Same.
welcome.